So good afternoon and welcome to today's ZestCast. As you know, on the ZestCast, we're interviewing our expert contributors to the Zest Wellbeing Hub and also special guests. And Laurie is one of our contributors. The recording from the last ZestCast is on the Wake Up with Zest YouTube channel. And that was with Nikki Williams talking about women's health. We're talking about menopause. But today we are interviewing Laurie Weber, who is a weight management and nutrition coach from the Mindful Eating Clinic. And she's going to be talking to us about learning how to eat and not how to diet. So everybody's on mute. That's fantastic. As always, there's opportunities to ask questions at appropriate moments, or you can type questions in the chat box as I'll be monitoring it. So, Laurie, thank you so much for being a part of our ZestCast today.
A pleasure.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the Mindful Eating Clinic?
Yes, of course. So, well, firstly, thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be speaking to the people who are in the room today, and hello to people watching and listening on catch up. Yes, so the Mindful Eating Clinic is all about helping people find a happy life with food. And by a happy life with food, I mean to behave around food in a comfortable way, to manage their weight in a natural, more intuitive way, without dieting, without restriction, without guilt, without anxiety, without extremes, essentially. And I started the clinic in response to my own experiences. So if you'd said to me 10 years ago when I was in corporate training and coaching, oh, you're going to be running a business that helps people stop dieting and eat mindfully, I go, no, I'm not. But what happened was so how old was I? I was in my mid-50s, and I realized that I had been eating in a disordered way for several decades, quite a few decades, and I managed to fix myself. So I applied some of my coaching techniques, but I basically did it. At the time, I didn't know what it was. I basically did it through banishing all thoughts of diet culture and all dieting behaviors from my life, and applied some of my NLP coaching training to myself. So I dealt with myself as if I was a third party, and managed to fix it, and had such an epiphany, I suppose, that I thought, gosh, if I can do it after 40 years, then actually anyone can do it. And I thought, if I can help people see the light and get off this destructive roller coaster, to have fewer years of disordered eating than I had, then that's what I want to try and do. So that's how the Mindful Eating Clinic came about. And it started just quite casually. I just thought, I'll just start an Instagram account and just put a few thoughts out there. And it started to gather some traction. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I could actually help some people. So I helped a few friends, just chatted to them, and didn't do it as a business at all. And then I thought, yes, I actually do have something to offer, and read a bit more widely and saw that it was a thing, it was an industry, and then did diplomas to, I suppose, help me formalize it a bit and get some structure and have more of a nutritional understanding. And that's how I've now ended up 2.5 years later running a fledgling business to try and help as many people as I can to find this food freedom, this happy life with food that I now experience.
So what exactly is disordered eating?
So disordered eating, the commonest kind of symptoms would be someone who is in a pattern of overeating and then dieting to compensate. Someone who is a binge eater, someone who is unable to control, for want of a better word, manage might be a better word actually, the quantity of food that they eat. Someone who has a psychology around food that is quite judgmental. So perhaps someone who says, oh, I can't eat a donut because I'm not allowed to eat a donut. And if they have a donut, they might then feel really quite tangibly troubled about it, because it's on their list of foods that they think they shouldn't eat. And that's created by diet culture. And we're surrounded by it. We're surrounded by the idea that food is good or bad, and this whole moralizing thing around food that actually creates this negativity for a lot of people, and this sort of pattern of eating and guilt and shame. And then if I have cake, the disordered eating might then manifest itself in someone thinking, oh, I better do an extra half an hour's exercise to compensate, to burn it off, or to make myself feel better because I've had something that I shouldn't have eaten. So it's that kind of imbalance. Anything that really isn't a normal pattern of eating, and the normal pattern of eating relies on a much more intuitive approach, which is about hunger and about satisfaction, about eating when you need to eat, eating what you fancy, eating the right amount to feel satisfied, and then stopping until you need to eat again. And for people who don't have disordered eating, they will hear me say that and go, well, yeah, what's the problem? But functioning like that around food for a lot of people is very, very difficult, because of all the psychology and the baggage around dieting culture. And also sometimes, so it's not just about dieting culture, it can also be because people's response to their emotions has always been turning to food. And sometimes that's because that's how we've been brought up. And food has been a love language in your family. I mean, I had a grandmother who was bringing up a family in the war. And of course, they didn't have very much food. So when we were little, in the 60s and early 70s, her way of expressing love was to fill us with food, because she didn't have it when she was younger. And that was a wonderful thing for her to do. It was her real expression of love, but it meant that whenever we were troubled, it was food. Whenever we were celebrating, it was food. And there was also, a pressure to clear our plate, because in the war we didn't have food, and there were starving children in Africa, and all of those kinds of things. So sometimes we've been brought up around that reward culture of food, and sometimes we have made ourselves feel better with food, and that inherently is not a bad thing. But if we always turn to food in response to emotions, then that can have an impact on weight gain. So it's about a balance of trying to find a relationship with all of these factors, which can contribute to disordered eating in some form or another, to try and get a relaxed life around food, a relaxed perspective, which is still aware of hunger and fullness and nutrition in a gentle way, not in an obsessive way, which sort of allows us to live and not obsess about it, and have time to think about and go out and do things that are a bit more interesting, perhaps. So that's a very long response to a very short question. But I hope that's helpful for people.
But it is interesting from my own point of view that I spent 22 years on diets that never worked. Mm. And I had a mother brought up during the war who always made me finish my plate of food, which I think contributed to my weight problems in the first 37 years of my life. And also we're afraid of hunger as well,
Mm.
aren't we? We're afraid of that feeling of hunger.
Mm. Yes, yes. And in fact, some people come to me and they say, oh, yeah, but I can't possibly have any kind of feelings of hunger. And I have to try to talk to them about the different levels of hunger, and that actually a little bit of hunger is a very healthy sign, because it means that your body is getting to a point where you then need to nourish it. And I love this word nourish, because I like the idea of it being about health. It's not about weight, really. It's about eating in a healthy way. And then if you've got excess weight to lose, you will probably lose it, but it will take quite a time, because what I'm doing is not, weight loss is never the number one priority. It's about health, and it's about your relationship with food and your behavior around food. And then we see what happens, so I absolutely agree with you that, in fact, the stat, something around diets, there's anything between 80 and 95% of diets fail. And something like 60% of people, if they've been on diet or diets, can put on more weight than they lose with the diet. And of course, fundamentally, it's because the diet very often doesn't do anything about the eating behavior. It tells you what you should and you shouldn't eat, and it might tell you how much, but it doesn't do anything around all that psychology that I've just talked about, that relationship around food, and so it's never going to help you long term, because it's not sorting out that relationship that you have with food. And I know, because I spent 40 years, on and off diets. I mean, I can't tell you how many new notebooks or new diets I must have started on a Monday. And that whole sort of Last Supper psychology, isn't it? Right, okay, I've got half a tin of biscuits and I've got a cake, so I'm going to eat it today because I don't. And then from tomorrow's going to be the day. Boy, tomorrow's going to be the day. And I'm never going to eat like this again. And it's all going to be brilliant. And of course, then
we're just losing.
Am I freezing?
Yeah, sorry, you're back again.
Oh, I'm back in the room. Okay.
Back in the room.
Yeah.
We're talking about eating tins of biscuits.
Yeah, biscuits. So we have that Last Supper approach, don't we? Where we we overeat, because then the following day we're going to go on this miracle diet because we've just got a new book, and it's going to answer all our prayers, and everything's going to be so much happier, and the sun's going to shine every day. And of course, that's what the dieting industry does. That's why it's worth billions. And that's why it's worth billions because people keep going back, because it doesn't work.
That's right.
So people like me are a victim of our own success because if my stuff works, people don't ever come back. But that's great. That's great, because hopefully they'll tell someone else. But it means that I've helped them, and that's what it's all about, really.
Yeah, I hate January when the dieting season just like kicks into overdrive.
Yeah.
And I also hate dieting language as well, when people talk about cheating, or is this a cheat meal, or it's a sin, or especially with Weight Watchers, and they're sort of keeping their points. I had a client once who was keeping all her points for wine, which isn't very nutritious. And actually on Weight Watchers, I had a Twix addiction because I discovered I could eat Twixes. I never used to eat chocolate before, and I thought I can eat chocolate on Weight Watchers. And I actually had this addiction to Twixes that every day at 2:00 I had to have one. It had to be in the fridge. Oh God, it was just terrible.
Yeah, and I think it's Slimming World that calls them sins, isn't it?
Sins,
I mean,
that's right. Yeah.
them sins. And an avocado is quite a few sins. Well, an avocado is not a sin in my book at all.
Oh, no. Oh yes,
way up there as
with Weight Watchers and Slimmers World. It's like the devil's food, isn't it? Avocados.
Yeah. But I noticed that we had a little question.
Yes,
we can answer that question.
Yes. So from Rebecca, she said, "What do you think of fasting?"
Oh yes. Now, Paul, do you like fasting? Do you agree with
Yes,
it?
you're a faster, aren't you, Paul? Yes.
Yes. Well, Paul, why don't you unmute and tell us why you like fasting? Tell us what benefits it gives you.
I'm not sure. I'm trying to do it as a preventative measure. I like the idea of autophagy.
Okay. Okay.
And
But
the lowering of insulin,
yes.
and therefore being able to access your fat stores, and
Okay.
then you can burn through that way. But from a Alzheimer's, dementia side of things,
Okay. Yeah, interesting.
there may be.
Well, from my perspective, so working with the people that I work with, I don't encourage fasting, simply because what I'm trying to do is to encourage people to tune in to their hunger and to honor their hunger. In other words, if your body is telling you that you're hungry, physically hungry, and I explore different types of hunger because there's emotional hunger, there's time hunger, etc., then I believe that for those people that I'm working with, to honor that hunger and to eat something at that time is the best thing for them. But I know that there's some quite interesting research out there about fasting. And I think it is a personal choice. But I think for the people that I work with that have an uncomfortable relationship with food, the problem with fasting is that it feels to them like another diet. And they can use it as a weight management tool. And then we're into something very, very much like counting calories or 5 and 2. And they're all regimes which are playing around with your intuitive body's systems. You know, we have a perfectly good system, a perfectly well-tuned set of hormones which will tell us when we're hungry and will tell us when we're full. And dieting mucks about with those. And so it's about allowing your body to find itself again, to allow those hormones to talk to you and to respond to them when they are there. And then you don't need any regimes. You don't need to muck about with it at all. You know, we're operating inside one of the most sophisticated machines ever. It doesn't need to be tampered with. So I talk a lot about respect and about empowerment. It's about people listening to what their bodies need, understanding how it works and listening to it and going with it and being kind. You'll hear me use the word compassion a lot, because the thing about dieting is it can be quite brutal. You know, you're depriving yourself either physically of the calories that you need or psychologically of foods that actually you might really fancy. You know, if you want a plate of macaroni cheese, no amount of salad is going to cut it. It just isn't. You're not even going to get close, are you? So just have some macaroni cheese. It's fine. Have as much as you need, and when you're full, you stop and you feel great. You know, and that's what it's all about. And so, you know, that's what I try to do. I try and hand it back and say, you don't need any of those books. In fact, step one is that they all go to the charity shop, and the look on people's faces, they go, oh no, do I have to get rid of all my diet books? What happens if this doesn't work? I go, well, at some point, you got to trust something. You bought those books and you trusted those, and they've all let you down. So why not trust yourself? You know, and you can sort of see people grow in confidence. They go, oh, do you know what I did today? Do you know what happened? And all they're doing is just turning all back inside themselves and finding it inside themselves. And it is magical. You know, it really is.
I think you've got us all salivating for macaroni cheese now.
I know, I'm thinking I might go and make that now. It is one of the best, isn't it? It is one of the best. I did one the other day with some pancetta in. I don't eat a lot of red meat, only because I don't really like it. But oh, it was really nice. Little bits of pancetta in, very good. Anyway, we digress.
So you talk about sort of eating till you're full. So how do you teach people how to do that? I mean, I know how I do it because I've got off that dieting treadmill and I discovered that just actually eating healthily and then having my indulgence at weekends. But how do you teach people to understand when they're full?
Well, I have a hunger scale and I talk about a number of different symptoms that people might experience. So for some people, they have a rumbling stomach. For some people, they feel a little bit lightheaded. For some people, they start to feel their energy lapse. For some people, particularly binge eaters, I usually start by saying, right, I want you to eat 3 times a day, and I want you to allow a time period between. So if you're a binge eater, grazing is not a brilliant thing for you because it means that you're not allowing yourself that time to feel hungry. And I'm kind of pausing because I deal with everybody individually, so it sort of depends. But it's about allowing the space between the eating to experience what hunger feels like for you. And sometimes that will take some time. You know, this process that I'm talking about is not fast. It takes time, but the thing is then going to last forever. Whereas a 30-day lose a stone is not going to last forever, you know. So sometimes it can take months, sometimes it can take longer to really get to the point where you don't think about it anymore. Yeah, so teaching the hunger and feeling the hunger can be a little problematic to start with for some people. And also they're not quite sure, they can't really remember what it feels like. But they do get there. Some people get there in a day, some people get there in a week, a month. It just depends, really. And then the fullness is a little bit easier, but the fullness can only really be registered if the pace of eating is the right pace. And this is what mindful eating. So I call this business the Mindful Eating Clinic, because it's all about awareness and about being mindful. And actually the eating process being about mindfulness in all of its slightly meditative connotations, in that it's your relationship with what you have on that plate. And it's about eating it slowly and savoring it and enjoying it, irrespective of what else is happening around you. I am always the last to finish at the dinner table, and it's just tough because I am enjoying it and I'm eating at a pace that means that if I get to the last spoonful and I'm full, I stop, because I know. And if you eat too quickly, your stomach hasn't got time to tell your brain. And that time lag varies with different people. So that's something that we have to explore as well. And it's almost like creating your own little mindful bubble when you're eating. It's your little lovely sort of haven of that wonderful experience that you're going to have. So wherever possible, that it really is a little event for you. And then it becomes something that you start to respect and you start to enjoy. And it's not just about shoveling it down because you're going to then go off and do something else. That food is just as important an appointment in your diary as anything else that you might be doing that day. And that's what I say to people who work really, really busy days. I say, oh, I haven't got time to eat. I try and encourage them to prioritize it and say, well, would you say that about your meetings? Would you go, oh, I haven't got time to do that one? So why is that meeting more important than you looking after yourself, nourishing your body, eating in a way that's going to benefit you psychologically and physically?
So do you do any kind of portion control?
The portion control comes from your fullness cues. That's it. That's it. And one day you might want macaroni and cheese that big, and the next day you might want macaroni and cheese that big. Because as soon as you start portion controlling, then you are manipulating your natural intuitive hunger. And quite naturally, we are sometimes more hungry or less hungry on a particular day. It might be because you've done more exercise the day before, sometimes. You know, there are all sorts of different factors. So no, I don't. If someone is unable to tap into the fullness thing, I might say, right, okay, so I might give them an idea, say, of what an average portion might be. And I'd say, right, okay, so have this, and then tell me how hungry you were afterwards. Tell me how full you felt afterwards. So I might do that if someone is really struggling with understanding. And again, it just depends how someone is. But wherever possible, I want that power and that control and that understanding to come from them. Because the wonderful thing about mindful eating is that it's portable. You know, so you can be at a wedding, you can be at the biggest feast ever. And if you're in your mindful eating bubble, it's not fearful for you, you know, because you're taking that approach with you everywhere. Because I know a lot of people who fear Christmas, who fear times when there's loads of food around. They go, oh no, there's going to be all those Easter eggs. What am I going to do? How am I going to control myself? And quite a lot of that feeling comes because restriction creates overeating. So the fact that we think we shouldn't eat all that chocolate means it's more tempting for us. Whereas actually, if you say, oh, I'm going to have as much chocolate as I want, and you're applying a mindful eating approach, you're actually quite safe. You'll be fine. And it doesn't matter if you have a bit of extra chocolate one day anyway. You're not going to go on a diet the next day. You're just going to get up and live around food. That's it. You don't have to compensate. And that's quite a difficult, you know, mindset for people to get into sometimes around it, because that's not how they live. The chat box is very busy, Rachel. Do I need to respond? Yes. I don't know whether they're having their own little conversation or whether
Charlotte and Rebecca were sort of singing off the same song sheet, and they were asking about cravings for sweetness.
Oh.
Charlotte was talking about, I always fancy something sweet after a meal, and yep. Rebecca was asking, how do you deal with sugar cravings? And she said she loves the idea of listening intuitively to your body.
I know, it's great, isn't it? It just resonates. Just go, oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Sugar cravings. Okay, well, a sugar craving breeds a sugar craving for a start, because that's how sugar works. So I have a little routine. So when I finish dinner, I have a cup of tea. Not very sophisticated, but I do. It is Earl Grey tea. I have a cup of tea, and then I have either a medjool date, because they are just the sweetest thing ever, and I just make that last about 20 minutes. They're just so wonderful. Or I have a couple of squares of chocolate that I eat really, in fact, I don't chew it. I just let it, you know, melt, do its own thing. And that's it, really. And the sweet cravings thing. So this is a very, very, very interesting thing, this. So I do a mindful eating exercise with people that I work with. And they very often discover through this exercise that foods that they crave and foods that they think they really like, they don't really like at all. I'm going to leave that one with you, and you'll have to get in touch with me to find out more. But it is really, really interesting. Yeah, it has a lot to do with how fast you eat it. That's what I'll say to you. So there you go. Yeah. So if you can have your own routine that finishes off your meal, then that's a nice little end. That's a nice little end to your ceremony of eating. And that's fine. Of course it is.
I'm all for a couple of squares of sort of dark chocolate.
Yes, absolutely.
Dark chocolate.
And the other thing, Rebecca, is, and everybody, but I know that was Rebecca's question, if you don't allow yourself that little bit of sweetness, it's just going to be going in your head, isn't it? Nag, 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 nag. Yeah, but well, but I really, really shouldn't. And that whole should thing then says, oh, I'm just going to have 6 chocolate digestives instead, you know, and then you're on this roller coaster again. So just have that little thing that's just going to satisfy you. Take your time over it and then move on. Watch Line of Duty or something.
Which disrupts your sleep.
Yeah, I suppose it could.
Yeah.
I like all that stuff. Yeah.
Disrupts mine.
No.
But yeah, I'm all for medjool dates as well. I've just got back into them again because they are so sweet. And I was thinking, ooh, is
They're
it
incredibly sweet. Well, if you think that Bedouins and, you know, can go across the desert on a bag of medjool dates, you know, they're packed with sweetness and energy, but they got loads of fiber in as well, and, you know, other minerals and things, which I won't bore you with. But yes, they are really, really good food. Really good food. Yes. So have you got 3 tips that you'd like to give us before we open the floor? Oh yes. Now I wrote these down, didn't I? So I didn't forget them. Okay. Yes. My 3 tips. The first one is to relax around your eating. Just relax and just let it go and let all those past behaviors go. That's the first thing. The second thing, which I've mentioned already on this call, is to put away, just get rid of all the diet books. And here's a big one, put away the scales. But how will I know how I'm doing? Well, so I discourage people weighing themselves. You absolutely have to, once a week tops, but you have to be in the right mindset to get on the scale. So I like to just put the scales away. There are other ways of measuring how things are going, like behavioral goals. And that's what I encourage people to set. And then the big one is eat whatever you like, eat it slowly, eat it as slowly as you can, and trust your hunger and your fullness.
And do you recommend eating smaller mouthfuls?
Well, if you have a bigger mouthful, you just have to chew it for longer. So it doesn't really matter. I'm a great advocate of putting the cutlery down in between.
Yes.
I was kind of brought up to do that anyway, but I didn't always. But if you put the cutlery down, it automatically slows you down. And don't forget that digestion starts in the mouth. So the more you chew, the more you're starting that breakdown process. Saliva is an incredible thing. So you're helping your digestion as well as helping this whole mindful eating approach.
I always say to my clients, your stomach doesn't have teeth, so chew your food.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. And also sometimes what helps is to not have the distractions, but sometimes that's difficult. You know, if you live in a busy family and you've got the telly on and you've got children running around, that is difficult. So that's why I like to imagine this bubble for people. So they have their own space, you know, and just wherever possible to just try and keep that mindful relationship between you and that lovely plate of macaroni cheese.
Ooh. So has anybody got any questions that you want to ask Laurie?
I've got a couple.
Go on, Rebecca, far away.
You've been scribbling like crazy. Right, okay, go for it, Rebecca.
Thank you so much so far. It's so interesting, and I can honestly feel my body relax as you talk, because it's
great.
Almost, I think sometimes, not that I'm particularly dieting or anything, but I am very aware of what I eat. But it's just, I think everything you've said feels very empowering, and very much it's all about kind of self-kindness as well. So it fits in really nicely with what I believe in. First question, naked bars. I do like them. They are full of dates. What's your thoughts on them?
Well, from a nutritional perspective, I try to discourage people from eating too many processed bits and pieces, and they are put together. I don't know what the trans fat levels are in them, but they've probably got some in there. I don't know. I would have to check the label. I would prefer someone to make their own bar at home if they can. It's a great thing to make with children. You were nodding when I was talking about families. I don't know whether you've got children running around at home, but you know, so if you can make your own from natural products, then that's what I would recommend instead.
Okay.
And you know, so it's things like oats, and you can put some maple syrup in, you can put some dates in, and you know, mix them together, put them in a tin. Some you have to bake, some you can just put in the fridge. And there are quite a few recipes out there for them. That's what I would tend to do. And if you need a snack in between, I'd opt for nuts, seeds, and fruit. So wherever possible, you know, there are natural foods that will fill that hunger, that will probably do you better, really.
Perfect. And just my other question was, when you mentioned about behavioural goals, just curious what you would suggest.
Well, so rather than say I'm doing mindful eating because I want to lose a stone, I would say I'm doing mindful eating so that I can feel relaxed about food, so that I can enjoy my food more, so that I'm not obsessing about what I can and what I can't eat. So I try and encourage people to visualize what that version of themselves looks like. So I call it true place, after the Herman Melville quote from Moby Dick. So people are looking for what is their true place, rather than an end goal, because an end goal suggests that when you get there, what are you going to do then? You know, so if you, like in dieting groups, you'll have a dieting phase and then you'll have a maintenance phase. Well, with mindful eating, you're just on your own phase. You're just doing it forever. So that's what I mean by behavioral goal. What does it look like? What does it feel like? And sometimes that's quite difficult for people to get their heads around, and that requires some quite skillful coaching sometimes to try and resonate with how people think. But it's a shift away from numbers, away from calories, and away from what the scales say.
Brilliant, thank you.
Oh, hello, Charlotte.
Hi, so I've turned my camera on now. I was hiding, so I've got no makeup on today.
Well, no, that's all right. I'm not sure I've got
thank
much
you
on.
for your talk. It's been really interesting. It sounds really, really silly, but I have recently discovered that I've actually got an eating disorder, and I've had it pretty much most of my life, and I've only just discovered it now at the ripe old age of 40, and I feel really foolish for not picking up on this before. I thought I was just greedy, or had no control, or all these other sort of diet culture type behaviours. So I'm actually in therapy for that, but it's still really interesting.
Good. Well done, because it's hard to acknowledge. Yeah, it is.
It's quite emotional, actually.
It's hugely emotional. Well, I had binge eating disorder.
Yes, that's
on and off for 40 years.
Yeah, and you know, do all sorts of crazy things.
Yeah.
You know, like you talked about the compensatory behaviour as well. So actually listening to you has been really interesting, and I need to try and get more into the intuitive mindset. When you mentioned earlier about snacks, I try not to snack because of the lack of control I have. So when you mentioned about like nuts and seeds and fruits, that kind of thing, I've been known to buy a bag of mixed nuts and eat the whole lot in one go and actually feel ill afterwards because I just don't know when to stop. And I don't know if that's because of my particular disorder or if lots of other people find a similar thing with snacks, or I'm not sure. But is there anything that you sort of recommend there?
Yeah, well, it probably is the binge eating disorder kicking in. It's quite complicated in that there will be probably some sense of the fact that you shouldn't often drives the overeating side of it. I think you should talk to your therapist, but certainly for me, it's that if I had trigger foods, when I first started treating the binging, I did eliminate those trigger foods from my diet. Doritos were a massive one for me.
I think they've got
Doritos and hummus. I'm not even going to tell you how much I could eat, but anyway, so that was quite a big one. I mean, if you're out and about with them, you could always measure out a handful in some cling film and take them with you, but then you eat them mindfully and you ask yourself how you feel afterwards. Do you feel satisfied? And the thing with binge eating is it takes a while for us to understand what the hunger is, because we spend a lot of our time with a lot of food in our stomachs. And so that can be quite difficult. So I would start like that, but it always comes down to the eating mindfully and trying to disconnect from everything else apart from the process of eating and how full you feel. Have a go at that. Get in touch if you want a chat, honestly, about it. But yeah, try that first.
Thank you. I think because we're at home at the moment, it's easy to think, well, I'll leave that bag of nuts in the kitchen, but it's pretty easy to just walk back downstairs and go and get them again. Whereas if I took them to work in a packed lunch, I would take just one portion.
Yes, and in a way, you are controlling it because you're scared of what might happen. So you're in that kind of middle phase, whereas eventually you can get to a point where rather than saying, I can't have that, or I'm scared of having that, you're actually going to say, yeah, I could have that, but I don't want it.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I was there.
You will. Trust me. Honestly, sweetheart, I was doing it for 40 years. Don't start me. I was doing it for 40 years and I got there. You can. You can do it. You absolutely can do it.
Thank you.
One of my things was eating raspberry yogurt and cornflakes. That was my binge eating thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds good.
Has anybody else got any questions? Or want to type anything in the chat box? Well, I've put Laurie's details. If you scroll back through the chat, it's sort of towards the beginning. So you've got, well, your website is themindfuleatingclinic.com. And then we can find you on
Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Don't use Twitter a lot, but I am there.
Oh, I don't.
And I only said something quite disparaging there. Sorry. And I'm also on Pinterest, but I really need to manage that very well. So that's not very organized. So Instagram and Facebook are the best things. You can book me for a free 20-minute call to see whether I can help you. And I do one-off hours and packages, and I'm going to jump in. I know Rachel's going to ask me anyway, but I'm going to do it. I've known Rachel for quite a long time, so she won't mind. I'm just about to launch a new online program. It's my Think, Eat, Live program, which is a group program, which has an online portal with lots of activities and thoughts and coaching. And then we get together on Zoom to compare notes if you want to. You don't have to do that whole public thing. But so there's that. And then there's also all the one-to-one stuff that I do, which of course is 100% confidential.
And when does your course start?
My course starts, so the materials are released on the bank holiday Monday the 3rd, and then the optional Zoom meetings will be every Thursday, and it's an 8-week program. And it takes you right through that process of looking at your own eating and finding ways to find a happy life around food. That's what it's all about.
Fantastic. So any last minute questions?
I've just got one. I do like asking questions.
That's all right.
how do you work out, like if you've got a few behaviors and things from your childhood, or because I know, for example, my mum is a feeder,
Yeah.
not in a bad way, but even I cannot leave a plate. If there's any food on a plate, I cannot leave that because I've been taught to finish my plate. And very much, if someone came into, our house, it was always making sure people left feeling full. So I am the same. So I've totally inherited that. So if anyone comes over for dinner, or on the days when we could entertain, just like how can you almost not kind of reverse that, but how, obviously I've got the awareness now, you've mentioned it, but how do you deal with that so that you're not over providing? But on the other hand, I don't want to under provide. It's about
well, I think you ask the people what they want. Are they hungry? And if they're not hungry, then they don't have to eat, so if you've got children coming in, if they're not hungry, they don't have to eat necessarily at that time. I think it's lovely that food is a love language, and I wouldn't want to take that away from anybody, but maybe it's just about reining it in, and also saying to yourself, actually, it doesn't matter if they don't eat at all. It's not a reflection on me. It's not a rejection. And that actually that's a good thing, because it means that they've had enough and they know when to stop, and try and turn the thinking round to think about it in that way.
Okay, thank you. It's very helpful.
You're very welcome. Great.
So if you've enjoyed this ZestCast, post about it on social using the hashtag ZestCast. So that'd be great.
Oh, yes.
And I'm at Wake Up with Zest is on Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter. Like you, Laurie, I don't really use Twitter all that much. I just do it because I have to. So next week, we're going to be talking to Jo Tocker, who's talking about aromatherapy oils and mental health. So that's on Thursday the 15th at the same time, 4:30. And then the week after that, we are talking to Vicky Bauman about yoga. So why don't you yoga? So they're both contributors to the hub. And then on the 29th of April, we're talking to Jenna Collins from First Beat. And she's going to talk to us about how to keep healthy using technology. And First Beat make heart rate monitors, and they actually put them in a lot of the fitness trackers, all the ones except Fitbit, which is the one that I have. And then on the 13th of May, we're going to be talking to hypnotherapist Joe Forshaw, and he's a solution-focused hypnotherapy, and I've referred quite a few clients to him. And we're going to be talking about how to cope with our hunter-gatherer brain. So that sounds like it's going to be a very interesting session. So Laurie, thanks so much for your time and for inspiring us today. And thank you everyone for attending. The recording will be up on the Wake Up with Zest YouTube channel by Monday latest. So everyone have a great evening and see you on the next ZestCast. Bye for now.